Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with 𝘃𝗶𝗹𝗲. We're only the strongest roots, see the light, brought to you by Botanica Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, as well as share it. Today we're going to be going over an Orisha that a lot of people haven't heard of, but has some great information for us to learn about our culture from. And that Orisha is the Orisha Yewa. Phil, have you heard of this one?
Now, when you say Yewa, it reminds me of Yahweh.
Yeah, basically backwards, right? If my
Yeah.
if my dyslexia serves me right, yeah.
But yeah, this one I have not heard of. In the 2 years we've been doing this is a new one to me.
Yeah, Yewa is she's definitely an obscure woman. She's a female deity, just like the majority of them. She has a river associated with her, kind of reiterating her feminine power and the fertility and all those concepts that our Nigerian brothers hold dear. But there's a gentleman on my shirt. I'm not sure if we see.
Hold on, I'm gonna go to the wide view.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, this is my alter ego, and this is Chango with the dreads. Yeah, these are the new shirts that we came out with, and as we all know, Chango was a very bad boy. He was definitely misbehaved when it came to the ladies, and unfortunately, his conduct really affected Yewa in a way that she would never forget. So her life story is an interesting one because she was actually 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍𝗍's preferred daughter, and she had taken a vow of celibacy, and she was going to focus completely on Ifá Orisha worship, and she actually abdicated the right to be able to have a partner and procreate and all these other things to focus on her sacred vows, which actually, even though the concept of the nun actually isn't in our spirituality, there are positions over there based on clans where there are women that forego earthly pleasures to be able to focus completely on the Orisha, and they're the ones who sometimes or usually interact directly with the most sacred icons in the inner sanctum of clan to clan or city state to city state.
That's not a 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗶 though, right?
No, the 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗍 is the spiritual wife of 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗲. Her position by nature is that of procreation, that of relationships. She enters into a spiritual covenant with 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗲, but that does not restrict her from being able to have a regular, satisfying and fulfilling relationship. So that's actually born in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗶, where women can spiritually dedicate themselves to 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗲, but he actually, when it comes to their interaction, he prefers that they have a partner because he knows the happiness it can bring. But, everybody's born for different things, and I have heard of some of these sacred women, at least it's the women I've seen in this role over there, it's for a time. While they're fulfilling this role, they abstain. But I have heard of afterwards them, carrying on with their lives as they see fit, but usually pretty practical.
Do they have titles like in Catholicism, that sister?
Yeah, they have titles. Like each one, I know specifically in the Oshogbo state, there's a young lady that fulfills that role. And she interacts directly with Oshun, and she abstains and whatnot. The name escapes me at the moment, but it's a very well-known position because that specific person is the one who leads the procession to the river and things like that. She's seen as, Oshun on earth at that moment. That energy is radiating her because she hasn't, interacted on that level with another human being. So there are positions like that, but as far as there is a specific name, but it escapes me. But it's easy to identify because it's literally one per, village, clan, etc. She's identified very easily.
Nice. Okay.
So Yewa was actually a resident of the sacred garden of 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗍𝗲. She was pretty much alone. She was kind of distanced from everybody or kept away, not as a punishment or anything like that, but just for her to be able to focus and, fulfill her duties and things like that. She was usually in the company of animals and, nature and whatnot. That's why she's a deity that doesn't readily interact with humankind. Even though people can receive her, it is a process as far as preliminaries, and it is a very delicate deity that not everyone really receives. Like me personally, she's not present in my sign of 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍, so I don't anticipate ever receiving her. I have interacted with her on a couple times, but it's a very solemn thing. Like it's a very serious deity, along with like 𝗁𝗏𝗏𝗏, 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏 as well. These are women that are completely no nonsense. So with her, she was doing her thing. She has a lot to do with nature worship and animals as well. She's a patron for them as far as an Orisha. And, you know, Chango sometimes would visit his father, 𝗀𝗲𝗍𝗻, and, you know, he couldn't help but notice that there was this beautiful woman in the garden, right? And he'd kind of look over there, and his eye would waver and things like that. And 𝗀𝗲𝗍𝗻 would look at him and be like, stay away from the girl in the garden. He's like, nah, I wasn't interested in her. There's a girl over there? He's like, I'm no fool. I know you very well. You have a reputation that precedes you. Please don't mess this up. And he was like, okay. But of course, you know,
That's a challenge.
That's a challenge for him. That's a real challenge for him because if anything killed Chango, it was definitely curiosity. And, you know, little by little, you know, every time he would come around, he would get closer and closer to the garden until one day he kind of got to the border. You know, I guess there was a hedge, and he started a conversation with her. And she introduced herself. She was, I won't say she was naive, but she was very innocent. She didn't, you know, she didn't think twice about, you know, interacting at least, even though she kept it very limited. You know, he started, you know, talking to her. Hi, I'm Chango. Hi, I'm Yewa. Oh, wow, you look beautiful today. She's like, oh, wow, thank you. No one's ever told me that. And, you know, little by little, he started easing his way in until, you know, he professed his everlasting love to her, right, which he had done to everybody beforehand. And
but this time is different.
This time was different. This time is always different from the last time. And she believed him, you know, and she started actually, you know, growing feelings for him for her. And they broke the sacred vow in the garden.
Oh, no.
This was a really big issue because even though no one necessarily saw them, at least, you know, human being wise, the animals saw, the trees saw, you know, this is a very mythical story. And then apart from that, she actually got pregnant. So, you know, you can only hide that for so long, right? And little by little, she started showing, and 𝗀𝗲𝗍𝗻 quickly realized what had occurred, and he started inquiring, you know, and, you know, the tree came clean, the squirrel came clean, everybody kind of, you know, they had to snitch because it was like, you know, it's we don't want no problems. We didn't break any rules. So, you know, Yewa was basically interrogated about what had occurred, and she explained that Chango was the father of her child, or in some cases children, because Chango by nature, they say that every time he procreated, he had twins or more, because he was very blessed in that regard.
Oh,
but
wow.
Needless to say, 𝗀𝗲𝗍𝗻 did not approve of the union. He couldn't do anything to Chango because Chango was king of kings, so he couldn't really punish him. But he sent Yewa to a place that Chango would not visit, and that was the cemetery. And this is where the story gets a little sad, is that she actually gave birth to her children in the cemetery.
Oh, no.
And she actually went to occupy and live inside of the tomb with her sister 𝗀𝗲𝗍𝗶, who obviously had a huge situation, an epic tale with Chango, of course, with the ear and whatnot. And they consoled each other. And they raised her children there. And Chango was never able to go and meet his children, and he never saw Yewa again.
Oh, man.
So it's really sad, you know, altogether as a story.
How come? Just because he's not allowed over there?
He wasn't. I mean, really, there was no way to keep Chango away if he didn't want to be kept away. But Chango has always had an aversion to the cemetery. Now, mind you, Chango is also known as 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲. He's the king of 𝗃, being that he was 𝗃's stepfather. But at the same time, he had a big aversion towards death. He didn't like to be around it. He didn't like to be around the skeletons and things like that, or in the cemetery. And maybe, you know, he wasn't really focused on being a father at that point. He was philandering a little bit more. So he really never made it a point to go over there, you know. And then apart from that, you know, the stain on his reputation, you know, both of the mothers of his children were living in a cemetery and he wasn't providing. It's, you know, and I love Chango. You know, people on the channel sometimes are like, man, Chango, you really go in on him. It's not that. I adore him. I respect him. But, you know, these are the things that occurred in his life that all of us have to learn from, not just his children, but everybody. You know, we have to be accountable for our actions. You know, we should never do in private what we wouldn't do or want people to know in public, per se. You know what I'm saying? So he ultimately, to a certain degree, destroyed her life, you know, because it wasn't that he needed another intimate partner. He just, you know, saw something that was unattainable and, you know, wanted to, you know, feel the adrenaline of the challenge of being able to obtain it. And he did, and it had huge ramifications, you know. But I think a huge lesson there, I mean, just with this first story about this deity, especially with the interaction with Chango, is that Ifa says that we shouldn't persist in having things we can't have. Not because we ultimately can't have them, but we have to make sure that what we're trying to obtain is productive and healthy. You know, it was made very clear that, you know, Yewa was fine not knowing the pleasures of the flesh up until Chango showed her. And then at that point, it completely changed her and made her ineligible for the position she was ultimately destined for but couldn't fulfill. You know, and it's also a testament to her innocence. I mean, this deity also within the Afro-Cuban practice has been crowned directly very little. And a lot of it has to do with this story. A lot of the older priestesses used to say if you receive Yewa too young or you ultimately crown her, it may lead to solitude, the same way she was. That's why for the longest time, people didn't want to crown 𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲. They didn't want to crown 𝗁𝗏𝗶𝗏𝗏. And we're entering into this phase now where a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the idea of crowning these deities. But I think ultimately the most important thing we can do is learn from their successes and failures, to repeat them or avoid them, right? But every Orisha can be crowned as well as Yewa. I had heard that there was a very, very old Santeria that had Yewa crowned, and she was the last one, and she lived in Havana. But I don't know if things are starting to, you know, activate again where they're starting to, you know, bring people into that cult. But it is legitimate, and it was done within the last century as well. It's just, it's not common because when you hear literature like this, most people would rather not, you know, delve in per se, as opposed to like a life story like a Chango or Oshun, which for the most part popularly is seen as, you know, all flowers and parties. You know, Yewa's story is one. It's kind of like 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗲, you know, where it can end up being very pessimistic very quickly.
Do you know that? Do you remember? Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but if you're in the chat, so this reminds me of the story of Persephone.
When they took her down to Hades,
yeah,
with the pomegranate seeds,
yeah, almost a little bit.
That story,
does that ring a bell?
That story is actually in the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃.
Okay,
and even though it doesn't have to do with this specific Orisha, even though she fulfills it as well.
Oh, my bad.
No. It's ultimately the same concept. In the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 was where 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃, who was the daughter of 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃, was actually coerced by a path of Eshu known as 𝘃cie�13 to go into the depths of earth with him, right? And she spent the 6 months there. He fed her, I think, instead of the pomegranate seeds, I think it was corn or guinea peppers, alligator peppers, and she ate 6 of them. So when, you know, the time came for the great negotiation that occurred between him and his mother-in-law, he said, well, she has to stay with me at least half of the year, you know what I'm saying? Because she didn't really want her daughter with this gentleman because he wasn't physically what she expected. He wasn't socially what he expected, but he loved her very much and he provided for her wonderfully. And she was beyond protected. So, you know, she condoned it. But at the same time, she's like, I need to spend time with my kid too. So they kind of, you know, they went back and forth.
Okay.
But it's kind of the same thing in regards of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 viewed Yewa as perfect. She was all of the innocence and purity, you know, that I guess any father could want out of a daughter, but, you know, it can be very unrealistic because, you know, women have to have lives. I think the first thing we have to recognize as dads or parents is that, you know, our children ultimately become adults. Our sons will become men. Our daughters will become women. And even though, you know, we want to protect them and we want to avoid them getting exposed to things too quickly, we also have to facilitate them in a way where one day they'll be eligible for a mate because Lord knows they can't live with us forever. So, you know, 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 was willing to do that, and ultimately Yewa wasn't, you know, and even though she went through said process, she still had her children. You know, I mean, even though Chango wasn't necessarily there, I mean, she was able to survive and proceed. But it is a sad tale in that regard because things kind of deteriorated very quickly for her. And ironically, she found consolation in, you know, one of the mothers of Chango's children, you know, or many.
How come this deity isn't really talked about much?
Because she's really obscure. Like a lot of the really powerful ones is. I mean, she has a lot to do with death. She has a lot to do with the transition. She's actually one of the deities that resides inside of the tomb that facilitates the decomposition process together with 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃. So she's even more intense than 𝗃𝗏𝗃, where 𝗃𝗏𝗃 was maybe a little more social. Remember, 𝗃𝗏𝗃 was the queen. 𝗃𝗏𝗃 was, you know, in a certain social, you know, strata within her culture and community. Yewa was completely tucked away. So it's a little bit more, she was more sheltered. She was more reserved. She doesn't necessarily, there's not a lot of stories or literature on her as far as interacting and things like that. So that's why Yewa is not really touched on, and a lot of people don't even know she exists because to be able to receive her can be tedious as well. Like, you actually have to have somebody that can give it to you, someone that knows how to direct the ceremony. This is a very special niche within like the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 or Orisha community that people know how to do this correctly, because this is one of those deities you really don't want to slack off with at all, simply because, you know, she's very, you know, minute when it comes to details and things like that, because when you go through traumas like what she went through, she really doesn't have the time or the patience for the nonsense. So, you know, that's why you really don't hear about her much. And to be frank with you, even to find the 3 stories, you know, that we're touching on today, with 2 of them being able to be corroborated by Odu, it was tedious. I mean, I've studied 𝗲𝗏, decades now. And to be honest with you, as far as stories, like literal stories where she's the main character, good God, I've only been able to find these really, other than, you know, hearsay.
Now, since she's a more obscure Orisha, can you be crowned?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're crowned, how do you pronounce the name? How do you say it again?
Yewa.
Yewa. When you're pronounced Yewa, what should happen? Like, what are people looking for? Like,
well, I mean,
it's crown that.
Yeah,
it's going to be a surprise, right? Because people aren't really going to know that they are crowned Yewa if it's not like a big name, right?
Sure. And I mean, put it this way, in the numerous 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗲s that I've given, and even more so that I've directed, it's never come out. Because it's not one that we ask initially. It's not one that, you know, comes up like that. I mean, I prudently wouldn't ask for that initially because I know how tedious it's going to be for that person to get crowned in that, you know, where a lot of people who were revealed with this within the past century just stayed at 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗲 just because of that. They couldn't find the options, or they weren't willing to go to Africa to be able to do it. But the information is there now, just like with 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 or 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏, etc. All of the information is there. It's just a matter of finding enough individuals with the fortitude and preparation to be able to take the person through the process. But, I mean, as far as characteristics of the children of Yewa, I've never actually personally interacted with one. Like I said, I had heard of the story of that last woman who was crowned Yewa in Havana so much time ago. I don't know if she's still alive or not. Last time I heard she was, but that's been years. You know, you kind of have to look at the story. Someone that's very reserved. I don't want to say antisocial, but someone who really doesn't interact that easily or that fluidly. Someone with a lot of high moral virtues. Someone with very you know, grounded concepts. But I mean, to even have a comparable is going to be difficult because I've never actually met one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this 20 years.
My whole life. I've only heard of one. I heard of another person, but they weren't crowned, that had 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗲 that I never had the pleasure of meeting. But I mean, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 instances where I've actually been told, like, hey, said person is a child of said Orisha. And I was like, whoa. Because that's even more, I mean, for example, the other day I just met my first child of 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗏. He's a gentleman who has 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗃. He was identified as a follower of 𝘃𝗏𝗿. And that was the first time in decades, literally. I had heard of another one, but, you know, and I've heard of, I guess you could say it's more numerous, but I mean, something like Yewa, you just, you know, if you actually meet one or ever have the privilege of being able to be present when one is crowned, is like, you know, it's an absolute privilege. Those are things you just don't see, maybe in this lifetime or the next.
I hate to ask this, though.
Sure.
So let's say someone is crowned 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗏 or Yewa. Did I say it right?
Yeah, it was good.
And they're disappointed. What happens next?
Nothing. You're crowned and disappointed until you become, you know, satisfied. I mean, for example, when I was revealed a son of Oshun in the 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗃, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. I thought I was a son of this guy, you know, with the long hair and, you know, with the dreads like I used to have.
You can't be two though?
You have a father. You have a father, but, you know, I mean, if you look at 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍, they crown as many as they want, right? But with us, we're identified one, or we follow a lineage, and that's the one we focus on. So and we asked for Chango in my 𝗃𝗏𝗋𝗃, and he gave a very strong no. Maybe if I would have crowned Chango, I would have, you know, delved into all of those Chango characteristics that I had as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old young man.
Man, I want to meet 19-year-old.
I don't ever want to run into 19-year-old Joseph again, to be honest with you. But yeah, you usually get the one you need the most. But for example, my sign of hand of Ifano, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, said it's where people first became dissatisfied with their orishas. And that was the cause ultimately of their downfall. It says the more you align with this orisha and the more you accept the reality of it, the better things are going to go for you. And ever since I just completely assimilated Oshun into my life, things have been wonderful. Put it this way, Chango didn't even come out my father. He actually, his father came out, 𝗃𝗶𝗹𝗁, because my father in Orisha is 𝗃𝗃𝗃. So, but he is a very strong focal point in my sign, and, somebody that, I've gotten a lot of results with and have interacted with quite a bit. My mother being crowned Chango and my grandmother being a daughter of Chango. My son has crowned Chango. He's definitely been present throughout my life. But as far as disappointment, it's, we don't choose our parents. We don't choose the energy that's best going to assimilate us, especially within our tradition. But, in 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗏, they don't have those customs. You initiate into any Orisha that's affiliated with your sign. So it's a little bit different. But what I have noticed is that when people accept the revelation from their hand of Ifa Lukumi style and they assimilate that deity and really align with it, they have the best life possible. That's really what we're asking there. We're not asking, hey, who's your guardian Orisha? We're asking which Orisha is going to assimilate you the best to have the best possible life altogether,
So it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole?
Yeah, it can be. It can be, depending on how the person wants to proceed. The only thing I've noticed is that the more frustrated people become with their, head energy, the more frustrated their life is, where they see various aspects of it not coming to fruition how they might want, lack of partnership, lack of prosperity, lack of progress, unfulfilled goals,
So when someone, does the hand of Ifa, they may not even know who these.
No, I've had people literally come. I've had people that provided me the funds, and I met them the first day of their ceremony. Like, hi, Padrino, nice to meet you. The amount of confidence they deposited is unparalleled. But, we'll get to that third day. We'll get to the moment of truth. And, yeah, you're a child of 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃. Like, who the hell is that? And they've heard of Ogun and Chango and Eshu and all these people. And then you're like, yeah, you're a child of Orisha. Like, oh, God, what do I do now? And that's really where you deposit your confidence, is in the house that can help facilitate those goals. That's really the responsibility of the spiritual elders, is to be present as a focal point of progress for that godchild to be able to fulfill their destiny, because that's your responsibility as well. It's not like, hey, you got this, goodbye. No, if they're trying to proceed within your house and initiate further with an Orisha within your house, which in my case usually is my wife, that's where the studying begins. Now I got to start learning all of the songs and prayers that go into the process. I have to coordinate with the Oriate. I have to, I might call back to Africa, a couple different people that, are of confidence. I'll call Cuba and be like, what do I do here? Because that's another thing. Most people look at me and be like, man, Baba never asks questions to anybody. Man, I bother my elders so much. It's crazy. I don't have any shame in that. And that's really what facilitates growth, is the absolute humility of bothering an elder, And now, mind you, I don't do it after certain hours, but if you do not pester your elders and your teachers, you will never learn. The lack of humility that comes from not asking a question is because we're embarrassed. Like, we don't want to bother you, or we don't want to, interrupt you. No, I'm going to interrupt you, and then you don't have to respond until you're able to. Now, if you're having family time or whatnot, like, I'm not going to send you 10 messages, but I'll send one good message at an opportune moment, and I'll get a response at some point. But you have to have that humility, because your growth is what is going to facilitate other people's growth. Without it, everything stops.
Okay. So, Shango's colors are red.
Yeah.
What about Yahweh?
With Yewa, I have seen it's pretty. I've seen like a magenta, like dark purples, maroons, wines. I've seen kind of like a montage of those kind of hues. But it's almost like it's funerally. Where if it's not, how in a funeral, if it's not straight black, you have these very like deep reds and burgundies and magentas, and it's kind of like those kind of colors, what I'm saying? Almost like
because of the cemetery,
because of the symbolism that goes with her. And then you look at, and this is pretty grim, but this is another great interpretation for it, is when you look at a unfortunately a cadaver, right? Or somebody that's been buried. When the decomposition processes and all those things start to seep into the cloth over time, it's going to go through that spectrum of color, where we have the bright red and the dim red, the magenta, the deep purple, the maroon, and then ultimately black. So it makes sense why her colorways are that kind of spectrum of decomposition of the color red. And it kind of makes reference to where we started with Chango with the color red, and then we furthered ourselves from them, So ultimately, it's reminiscent of that separation, right? So
wow, that's interesting take.
Yeah, and when we look at Yewa as well, there's an Odu known as 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲 or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲 or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲 or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗲, and it speaks of the aftermath of the divorce or debacle that happened with the separation between Yewa as well as Chango. So Yewa now is living in the cemetery, right? She's kind of been shunned and excommunicated by her family. She's living in a place that doesn't have a lot of resources, and to be able to feed her children, she actually started feeding them the bones of the bodies that would arrive, right? They were able to survive, but when the other Orishas heard about this, they thought it was completely heinous, and they actually, did a DCF investigation, and went into the cemetery where they were able to visually confirm what they were seeing. And when they saw it, they were completely taken aback and appalled, and they decided to attempt to take the children away. But Yewa implored to Orula to be able to talk some sense into them or to get Ifa's judgment on what was occurring here. And when divination was performed, the Odu 𝗿𝗲𝗏 was revealed, where Ifa said, at the end of the day, if no one's providing for a child and the child is surviving and not, neglected, no one has any right to comment on or, criticize the parents ultimately. And Yewa seconded that and said, yeah, it's easy for you guys to, judge me and comment on how I raise my children, but where's their father? King of Kings, he doesn't provide anything over here. And I'm not just going to lay down and die. So this is what I have, and this is what I'm able to provide. And this is my situation, where all the other Orishas became so emotional and so moved by it. They all started donating and assisting in raising Chango's kids that were Yewa's children, and they were able to have a quality of life at that point, even though they had to stay there because that's where, they were comfortable with and what they knew. Yewa's children didn't even want to leave the cemetery because that's not all they had known. And if they would have seen their father, they wouldn't have recognized him anyway because they never really got a chance to meet him. So once again, kind of sad story, what I'm saying? And, when you look at morals and things of that, it speaks of the importance, regardless of whatever, stage of society we're at or phase we're at, ideally, both parents are in the home, ideally. Because, what mom can't provide, dad does. What dad can't, mom does. And, it's just an overall healthier unit, regardless of how independent and strong, some of these single parents that I've met are. Ideally, we need partnership. We need dynamic, and to give this child the best exposure and chance of, a healthy, fulfilling life moving forward. But in this sign, Yewa was doing it all on her own. And, and that Odu is actually where the DCF or investigation, first manifested, however you want to call it, but where an investigation was had to make sure children weren't being neglected and things like that, because that's an ultimate taboo within Ifa. Children should not feel pain or certain types of pain until certain points in their life. No child should know hunger. No child should know abandonment. And, when you look at the science behind these things, this is what leads to the anxieties or disorders that really plague our society from time to time, when people, go untreated. So Yewa was there for that. She was an advocate for single mothers. She was an advocate for people who were trying to survive and provide for their children. She's an advocate for children. It was a very pure woman. It was a very pure Orisha, but, unfortunately her circumstances gave people the wrong impression of her when she was like, I'm just doing what I can with what I have. So another thing that this reiterates with the children of Yewa, for those that are out there, very, very, very linked to the spirit world and the afterlife, and are mediums by birth and have a lot to do with the Egungun cult and all of these different things, because these followers, these people, these disciples of Yewa were literally the ones decomposing the body or processing through the funeral rites. I mean, when you look at the procession of death within Ifa and Orisha, they say that when someone transitions, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 is there. And that, Oya is there as well to kind of relinquish the last breath, known as 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗏, thus taking it, away. Or, the sacred spirituality of 𝗀𝗶, which has to do with the heart and the breath. And, when Ori leaves, when the extension of 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗻 dies with the person and then gets reassimilated back to its creator, kind of like Zion. All these different things. And then 𝗵𝗸𝗍𝗍 is the coroner. He comes and picks up the body and then takes it to the gates of the cemetery where Oya is there once again, but doesn't go in because then, who receives it is 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and Yewa, who live inside of the tomb to decompose it. So these are all of the personalities and characters that go into being able to transition, because the Yoruba say, the most complicated times of our life are being born and ultimately transitioning. There's a lot of preparation that goes into both, whether it's, from conception through 9 months and then ultimately birth, or, unfortunately the degeneration that leads to transition and then all that goes into the funeral and burial. So these are two of the most critical points in our life, obviously. So Yewa has to do with both of them, So
interesting. Definitely
a complex energy and deity, one that's to be respected. And this is why, people are so solemn around her and are very, particular around her, because, this is a woman who literally went through, really unthinkable things, and was still able to triumph, within them and still provide and raise a family, So it speaks of that, right? In the Odu of 𝗿𝗲𝗏𝗿, or 𝗿𝗲𝗏𝗍𝗏, as it's known, was where Chango, once again, and usually whenever you see Yewa, somehow Chango, this was her focal point. They were very star-crossed in that regard. But there's another story where Chango was a leader of men. He was a general, right? And, they were conquering and things like that, trying to expand the Oyo Empire. And they arrived in a land of Amazons, right? All women.
Yeah.
And they were like, whoa, and they're like, maybe we'll settle here for a little bit, kind of recharge our batteries. And the queen of that land was Yewa, and obviously the queen of that land and, Mr. General, king of said land, interacted, right? And Chango fell desperately in love with her. There's scripture that says that the woman that Chango fell most in love with was actually Yewa, not Oya.
Oh.
Because Oya was probably the woman that Chango was most passionate about, because it was so full of turmoil. They'd love each other and then they'd tell each other off and then they'd be intimate and then they'd fight.
It was toxic.
It was beyond toxicity. But the reason he loved Yewa so much was because he had all the passion and all of this romance without the headaches. It was really seamless with her. She was very, very comfortable in her role. She wasn't intimidated by her partner, so she didn't feel the need to enter into conflict or anything like that. And Chango was able to, exude his very masculine, viral self, and they were very seamless together. And this actually scared Chango, because what happened was he started getting comfortable. And he's like, why am I going to war when I have this amazing woman? I have this beautiful kingdom. My men are happy. They all have, women now, and they're having babies, and it's just a wonderful situation. So one day Yewa goes to him and he's like, and she's like, we've been together for some time now. Why don't we make things official? Why don't you marry me? And he was like, yeah. And he was like,
you gotta do the thing where you like raise your arms like you're yawning.
It's like, yeah. He got shook. He got real shook because no one had ever ran down on him like that. And he had an anxiety that evening where he's like, yo, this is literally everything I want, but I can't do this. I'll never be with another woman. I'll never go to a drum whenever I want. I have to be home with my kids. He started having the anxieties of life that as men, everyone has to overcome. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be a family man and a head of household and have a healthy life. And, in the middle of the night, while Yewa was sleeping after a night of passion, Chango jumped out the window and ran.
What?
And he never went back.
He went out for milk and didn't come back.
Forget milk, oil change, gasoline, whatever you want to call it, bro. He did a corner store run and went past the corner.
Dang.
And he left Yewa pregnant. And he never went back. He left his soldiers, he left everybody. And he said, "Yeah, I'm going back to Oyo." And he never went back there. So, once again, this star-crossed situation. I mean, if we look at this Pataki, Chango had everything he could have wanted. He had an amazing woman. She was going to birth him beautiful children, twins again. He was finally able to find peace. He didn't have to go to war anymore. His men were alive. He did them proper. He protected them and helped them find homes and wonderful women as well. He did everything he was meant to do. Chango was meant to. This story in 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗁 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 was actually the real. This would have been the most divine fulfillment of Chango, because it would have been Chango in his most relaxed, most fulfilled state. Woman, children, prosperity, all of these things. And, just he couldn't handle it, and he realized later that he made a mistake, because everybody gets older. And he realized, I lost the woman of my dreams, and now I'm older. Now, I'm with somebody that, I care about and I love, but that what I had with Yewa, I'll never have with anybody else. And that greatly pained him.
That was his fault.
That was his fault. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And he had to come to terms with that. And that's the part that people don't realize with these Orishas, but especially Chango, is everybody looks at Chango. There was a situation recently where somebody commented and said, well, Chango's life turned out pretty good, because the problem is they're looking at the superficial aspect of things. They're looking at the king, the drummer, the this, the that, but they didn't realize all the pain that gentleman went through ultimately, based on his own decisions. He had to deal with that, and him and Yewa never interacted again until the next life. That's why as human beings, 𝗃𝗏 states that we have to be very careful, because the saddest thing isn't losing people to death. We have to. That's part of life. The saddest thing is losing people to life. Somebody that you cared about, somebody that you interacted with, something that was positive in your life, and you made a decision or they made a decision where you couldn't be around each other no more. That's got to be one of the saddest things, and that's reiterated in this 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗲, right? But it says that ultimately all men must understand that they will find their other half. The hardest part isn't finding them. Most people actually find their soulmate, in my opinion. I think the hardest part is keeping them. Getting over ourselves to be able to accommodate to them the same way they accommodate to us, and just enjoying each other and not focusing on what we might be losing, but more focusing on what we're blessed enough to have with this person.
Do you think majority of people just kind of, when they find that right person, they just kind of settle and forget why they have that person? They take them for granted? I think
you don't know what you have till it's gone sometimes, and I think that's why we have to remain the same people we were when we were courting each other. You know what I'm saying? Like this morning, for example, I brought my wife some roses. You know what I'm saying? I bought both of my daughters roses as well, because I don't give my wife nothing without I give it to the girls, because then so these are the things that we have to maintain, and it's more than flowers. It's an I love you. It's hey, let's do this, or I was watching famous psychologist Jordan Peterson. He says one of the most key things to maintaining a healthy relationship is spending time on the couch and talking about our week, talking about our goals, seeing how we changed over a 7-day period. He said, without this, if we don't have that moment of re-encounter with our loved ones, we'll be lost, because we're changing, and rather than growing together, we're growing apart. So, that's what Chango didn't realize there, and that's what Yewa was fully prepared for. She said, this is the man I need. But what she didn't realize is that, this was the first time he had interacted with a woman this mature, this fully formed, this confident. And he was like, I'm not ready for this. And he missed a huge and great opportunity, because 𝗃𝗏 states in the 𝗀𝗲𝗿𝗲, the perfect counterpart would have been Yewa for Chango. More than 𝗃𝗏𝗍, God bless her. More because 𝗃𝗏𝗍 wasn't as, she was much more reserved in that regard. She was much more about the home, and then you look at Oya, she was a little too intense, and then Oshun was a little too, focused on the philosophy of romance and things like this. Yewa was Chango's perfect counterpoint on all levels. Like, she was eHarmony's dream match, you know what I'm saying? So, And once again, you know, he wasn't able to be a part of his children's life. And you kind of see this theme with Chango where there's various pataki where he's separated from his kids and whatnot. And, you know, with time, he ultimately had to reassimilate the home. So, you know, Yewa was a huge reminding factor of that as he reflected on it in the years to come.
So do you think that's, you know, I was talking with my producer here today, too, about regrets.
Sure.
Is this one of Chango's biggest regrets?
I think it was his biggest.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Interesting when you think about these deities, because, you know, they are these deities and orishas, and, you know, they're powerful and have all the, but they have these human characteristics. And,
well, they were human. That's the thing,
yeah.
is to become God, you must die. You know, Jesus, I mean, not to delve, well, how about
Don't
this?
do it.
Let's not, I'm not going there. God bless him wherever he is. You look at the various messiahs. You look at the various, we've had some run-ins. You look at the various icons spiritually. They didn't become anybody until they died. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, you're not famous till you're dead. You know what I'm saying? But 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁 literally means death births a deity. You know, as in the Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲. And 𝘃𝗏 states that, you know, that is why we're able to relate to these people. And it's not because it's just a random schmo that passed away, God bless the dead, but these were the original human beings. These were the Anunnaki. This is whatever you want to call it, you know. But these were the originals. That's why our existence is based on their experiences, because we're doing nothing more than reincarnating as them and going through the same situations over and over again. So when you look at somebody like Chango or Yewa or Oshun or any of them, that's why we resonate so much with them, because we are them, you know. And that's why this spirituality is so beautiful, because the lessons that we learn, it is a cheat code to life. And I tell you, you know, within my profession, you know, whenever you serve human beings, you can never expect anything. You have to sit there, you have to relay the information, you have to somewhat be unbiased, but they might literally take the advice and go in a completely different direction with it. So when you look at something as powerful as 𝘃𝗏, as impactful as 𝘃𝗏, as divine as 𝘃𝗏, and you see, you know, a lot of people utilize it to find out, you know, is my partner, you know, do they have a wavering eye, or, you know, is this crypto gonna pan out? Like, there's so many more profound clarifications and confirmations we can get from this oracle and this literature. And we need it. We need to use it for more profound growth, because, you know, none of those other things matter unless we're becoming the best us we can be. And that's what 𝘃𝗏 tried to do and serve all of these deities with. And that's what left us with this literature, because the best thing to do is not learn from our own mistakes, but learn from the mistakes of others. And these people were so humble and so honest that they literally put all of the most horrible aspects of their life on public display for us to learn from and not have to go through again.
Wow.
You know,
love it.
There's actually there's another story within that same sign of 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗏 as well. You know, after Chango left and he was outlawed from the land of the Amazons once again, because Yewa was so heartbroken and felt so betrayed. She never wanted to lay eyes on him again. He actually went through a huge depression, and he actually started playing the drums of 𝗏𝗏𝗏, and he actually created the rhythms reiterating for Yewa. And the Odu of 𝘃𝗏𝗿𝗏 was where the drum to Yewa was born. And, you know, she would hear the messages and things like that, but she could never get over what he did, because she was like, you betray me once, you're done. I don't trust you no more. You know what I'm saying? So that's actually there as well. You know, so the drum to Yewa is present. And then you have a lot of people who debate and say, well, you know, she can't be crowned. She's not as popular. If the Orisha has a drum rhythm, it's because they're able to be crowned, right? Because the only reason we have drum rhythms for the various Orishas is because when people get crowned or initiated into them, those are the messages we send to heaven via the drums of 𝗏𝗏𝗏, or whatever drum is specific to that deity, whether it's the 𝗃𝗏𝗏 for 𝘃𝗏𝗏 or the 𝘃𝗏𝗏 for 𝘃𝗏𝗏. That means they're able to be crowned, because that is the message that is sent to heaven, to let God know and that ancestral energy know, hey, we just initiated somebody else into this clan. You know what I'm saying? So 𝘃𝗏𝗏𝗏 or 𝘃𝗏𝗏𝗏 has a lot of information on Yewa as well. Forgive me, I'm going back and forth. Yewa, but that's there as well. And yeah, so Yewa is you know, this. I mean, there's a lot of positives with her too. It's just sometimes it's overshadowed, but feminine strength and fortitude, not tolerating any nonsense. I mean, and it's a different dynamic when you look at the story from 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗏, where she didn't allow Chango to do to her what, he had done to the others. Because Chango sometimes would, do some nonsense and then, they'd let him back in. For example, there were various times when Oshun got back together with Chango. There were plenty of times when Oya got back together with her, or with him. But,
But not Yewa.
Not Yewa. Even 𝗿𝗏𝗿𝗏, to a certain degree, was willing to tolerate all of Chango's nonsense, just to be with him. And, he made the decision not to, which was very ironic. But, Yewa was one and done. She's like, I'll never look at you again. And she meant it, So I think it's a reminder to everybody, always respect the lethalness of your partner.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying?
Say it again for the people in the back.
Always respect the lethalness of your partner. And what does that mean? Do not expect someone to give you a second chance. Do not expect people to have the patience for the nonsense, because we're all getting older. Every day that goes by, we have less and less time for the nonsense. So, when you look at, sayings like there's no wrath like a woman scorned. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Mm-hmm. Why is this woman choosing to react this way to said act of betrayal or lies or whatever? Is because, that's how she interpreted it. That's how she took it. So rather than getting physical, it's why you see divorces get ugly. That's why you see, or you go to the neighborhood and you see somebody popping off on the corner, be like, oh man, that brother must have done something wrong. You know what I'm saying? So,
were we outside?
Yeah,
that happened outside here. Remember, at the guy was getting yelled at.
I think so.
Yeah,
it's happened outside the Botanica a couple times too.
Man.
Orange Avenue gets really hot. So
yeah,
but I'm just saying, that's why you got to behave. That's why you got to focus on home. Love your partner, and accept that whatever they say is in your best interest, because they know you like no one else does or possibly ever will. And that's what Yewa was trying to show to Chango, and it just didn't work out. And this video isn't about Chango, by the way, but he's so intertwined. I mean, if you look at every story about this woman, he was there, or he had a role, you know. So it's impossible to speak about this Orisha without Chango. But Yewa, I think, is a testament to all those things. It's a deity that's really lovely as well. She's also symbolized by the rose. Is a flower that has to do with her, because she lived in the garden. She was Olofing's gardener to a certain degree, and she was seen as a sacred flower, which is what all women are. So, she has a lot to do with things like that. That's why you'll see sometimes like the tronos or the tapestries for her, they'll have like floral designs, or like her receptacle will have like a flower insignia on it, things like that. It's, kind of like the Beauty and the Beast concept.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, this has been a fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
If you didn't know, now you know.
Yeah, a lot of this isn't out there. Or it is, but not in a way where it's digestible. Like I said, it's taken a whole career just to get this much information on this energy, apart from what's popular. But, certain stories like the ones in 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗏, or even the one in 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏, these are ones that are not very popular signs either. Yeah. These are not signs that come out a lot either. So that's why, it kind of reiterates her obscureness, because she's present within the combinations within 𝗃𝗏 that are not common. So that's why, the information for her is hard to come by. But, I hope it provides nothing but clarity. And if you are a child of Yewa out there, just know there are options for you. And, there are houses that will take you forward or be able to facilitate it. And for those that want to receive it, and, it's an amazing deity, just be prepared. Because there's certain energies within the spirituality that we have to have a certain level of maturity and diligence with, and this is definitely one of them, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and for those, if you're watching this for the first time, go back. We got a ton of episodes. Take the content that you see here, and you can learn a whole lot. But you know what, Joseph? That's not it, though, right? Because you can become
a member.
Yeah,
the elevator
that
music for you.
It's true.
Yes.
So, us here at the All Roots podcast, 𝘄cie 𝗵𝗏𝗍𝗶 channel, you guys have 3 separate tiers of memberships, all which give their perks. So it's super easy. All you have to do is click on the join button right under this video, and then you can join in on the fun. We have live shows that are just for members, discounts on merchandise, all that jazz. So let's give a shout out to some of our VIPs. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
All right. So We got Luna Goddess. This is a new one.
Luna, thank you for joining.
All right, we got Anna Elizabeth Reynoso, also new.
Thank you, Anna.
All right, we got Stanley Gurley, who upgraded.
Thank you for upgrading, Stan.
All right, we got a new one here, too. We got Piranhago 999.
Thank you for joining.
All right, shout out to some super fans here. We got Ray Valentine.
Thank you, Ray.
Who's also new. We got Melissa Fraga.
Oh, Melissa, thank you.
Who's new. And we got Mama Magical celebrating their 9th month of being a super fan.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you guys so much. Be sure to let somebody know about the membership program if they can gain some value from it. A couple closing notes. 𝗃𝗏𝗃candlesandmore.com is up and running for all your spiritual needs, whether it be products or services. My wife, 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗍𝗶, is the spiritual realtor. If you're interested in knowing how the market looks for you and your goals, please feel free to reach out to us. The audio cast is up and running, bunch of downloads. In case you can't watch us, you're more than welcome to listen to us. If you want this guy on your shirt, I can't get enough of them. I wear this too much. Be sure to visit the store where you can find a bunch of clothing and whatnot. And sincere thank you from all of us here. And until next time, see the light, family.